Insert replay. You're good.
Okay, so it's 6:36. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So the first item on the agenda is present to speak. I see there's a few people on. If you would like to speak, just state your name and we'd love to hear your comments.
You all do have the ability to unmute as well.
Yeah, if any of the board members want to speak up as well.
All right, there's your answer.
All right, there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting, again, for present to speak. So feel free to take that opportunity at the end if you'd like. So next item is the chairperson report. So I did speak with Alice Cassells and invited her again to join our meeting this evening, and she did receive the questions and hoping to engage in a conversation with the Hall Foundation. We do have it on the agenda for this evening. So if she does hop on between now and then, we can certainly have that conversation. And I'm just going to jump down to communications because I also received a confirmation email. Ralph, I think you might be interested in this. It was regarding your comments from the Peter Prouda enrollment proposal.
Yes.
He did acknowledge the comments that were made and had stated that he understands what we've asked him to do and have written. I don't know if it's actually processed yet, but the comments that were in there were all accepted. There was one section regarding the, I think it had to do with the apartment complexes. And there was a clarification going back and forth whether we needed to do it or not, because the town actually already has all that information. So that's the only piece that we don't even need to do because we have that information in hand. But he is, and I don't know if, I don't know how to tell if the purchase order was actually issued. Erica, would you happen to know if they issued the purchase order yet for the enrollment study?
I don't know. Let me take a look while we're meeting and see if I can see it.
Okay, but again, it was just per our meeting last, was it 3 weeks ago, about approving that proposal not to exceed the 2,000.
I just think that it would be beneficial that the committee have a copy of the final document that Prouda has agreed to.
And so I'm going to jump back up to item number 4, the approval of the meeting minutes. So the last meeting minutes from October 20th were sent to the committee members via email. So I'd like to take a vote on.
You need a motion. I make a motion to approve the minutes of
right.
SBC meeting October 20, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Brianna.
Oh, who said that? Brianna?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor or discussion? Any
I had
discussion?
nothing. I had
Edits
nothing
on
to
the
add.
minutes? Anyone else have anything to add on the meeting minutes of October 20th? If not, let's take a vote. Are we doing roll call or can we just do all in favor to approve the minutes of October 20th? Please say aye.
You can try that. If
Aye.
it comes up with an option, then you have to do roll call. That's all.
Okay. So all in favor, aye.
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 Any aye, any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes to approve the minutes of October 20th. Next item, I'm going to item 6 now. Since I just gave an update on the Prouder proposal for under communications. So we have, currently we have 2 subcommittees, one for the land assessment and the other one for communications. How about we get an update on the communications, if anything?
We have not met and have nothing new.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And land assessment,
Hang on, I just had to unmute, sorry.
no worries.
It's the last meeting, but assuming that we have the conversation tonight about the, and we're close enough to get going on the next meeting, I am anxious to get started, and I will email the members of the subcommittee immediately after this meeting to talk about schedule when people are available.
Okay, Mike, can you just repeat that first part of it? I think one of your keywords was cut off.
Okay. We have not met since the last regular full meeting of the committee. And assuming that we have a chance to look at the matrix tonight that you and I talked about, Catherine.
Yeah, yeah.
Can move, kind of get our thing, then I'd like to email the group and get scheduled right away. The leaves are off the trees now, so looking at property is great right now. And let's see what we can see before it gets covered in snow.
Exactly. And the first, I believe the first set of properties or land is going to be what the town currently owns. That's going to be our first sort of task, right?
Yes, which is easy to arrange access and all that stuff.
Can I note one thing, Catherine? If I
Yes.
may. I know I shared it in a communication with you. I assume it will get passed along to the subcommittee that the town has now officially acquired the 2 additional pieces of property off of Boston Turnpike near Marsh Road's former Cadle Rock property. So just to add to our list, don't know that they're suitable, but wanted to make sure that when we're looking at those larger parcels of land that town, or any land that town owns, that we add those to it now.
Yeah, that will be, we will do an evaluation on that. There's a process where any possible properties, whether it be an existing building like hall or center, or properties in the area that the town owns, we will do sort of a preliminary checklist based on this evaluation matrix that Mike was talking about. It's just in draft form right now, so we have to have a meeting to finalize it and get some input before we actually start the evaluation process. But we are looking forward to getting going on that. Mike, it looks like are you driving still?
I'm home. I'm moving to the computer now off my phone.
Oh, do you want me to try to pull it up?
No, I'm in on my computer, so I'm gonna hang up
Okay.
on this phone and I'll come on the computer.
Okay. So, do you want me, I'll continue. Okay, so he's leaving. So I guess we'll just hang on a second because I think he's gonna share the matrix that we got started on, and then we'll jump into old business.
Can I ask Eric a question about Cadle Rock? That the property extends across the town line into Ashford, correct?
There are parcels that are in Ashford, but they're
Okay, I
2
think-
separate parcels that are in Willington. So
Okay.
they owned multiple parcels of land between the 2 towns. But if we were to utilize just the Willington's portion, we only own 2 pieces of land. The other is owned now by the town of Ashford.
Okay, so Ashford has what's in their town and we have what's in our town.
Correct.
Okay,
And as of right now, there's no developer, buyer. no use for it deemed by either town. There's always the possibility that we could look to sell it off as a whole if we chose to go that route. So there are lots of things that can be done with it, but for purposes of this committee, if it was something that was to be explored for a school, we'd be looking at just the portions owned by Willington.
Do we know if that property has been totally remediated?
It has not. We did
Okay.
apply for a remediation grant, but they really only took things that were shovel ready. And our project was not, we didn't have a project, so we weren't shovel ready, so we were turned down this time. But if a project comes along, we would apply again. There is another round in the spring.
Erica,
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
since we're on that, I know there was a significant remediation done up there managed by the EPA out of Boston, but what you're saying is that didn't do the whole property?
It did not. So the majority of the remediation was done by EPA. But the brownfield grant that the towns previously had to see, where we were at, did determine that there is some remediation to be done. Not
Okay.
nearly as much as would have been had there not been a cleanup by EPA.
Thank you, Erica. And the details that we're starting to discuss here, we will talk about those in our land assessment committee meeting, subcommittee meeting, and we'll certainly report back to the overall school building committee.
Okay, so on the top of the assessment matrix, I believe it says I'm screen sharing, so I'm assuming you guys can see this.
I can see it.
Right now, it's raw in draft form, but essentially you all can kind of figure it out. The left-hand column talks about property evaluation, and that is that's the column where all of the various attributes of the property have been plugged in. You can see that first grouping is off of the Office of School Construction Grant Review, or whatever that OSCGR acronym is.
Yeah.
And so these are taken right off of there. And then if you go down to the next, you can see again, there's a bold header for that section. So this is the rough and what I think, and then hang on, I'm sorry, I forgot to point out this last section here. This is a little more of our own assessments or questions, and may allow for some commentary or at least some added information as we do evaluations. So, obviously one that's sort of a big deal is the land is equal to or greater than 90 acres. But then you have something, line 59 is a free form field, which allows us the opportunity to make some unique notes about the property that are not necessarily black and white evaluation criteria. So this is it. We could go with it as raw as it is, or we could tune it. And particularly one of the things that I have been striving to figure out in my head is how to develop scoring from this. Mm-hmm. If we were to try to word each of these criteria in a positive, negative fashion, or give them a number score, so that then you essentially could use the spreadsheet to calculate how many
Rank.
no's there were, or calculate how many points each piece got, which would allow you to drawing a line and say, well, anything that's under 20 points is a second priority, and anything that's 20 points and over is our first priority to look at, or whatever the number is.
Yeah, Mike, that's a really good point. And I think once we get our OPM on board, I think they're going to be able to help us with fine tuning like the best way to rate it. In fact, we can consult with some experts in the field regarding how, people that do this every day. And, that's an easy thing that we can actually finalize. And maybe in our subcommittee, we can actually talk about that as well.
Obviously, any input from the full committee that help us get closer is great, since we're all members of since the subcommittee is all made up of members of this committee. Anything we can take from this meeting into that subcommittee meeting to finish this document would be great. And, you know, and credit to Catherine for doing a lot of the actual construction of putting this, getting these various attributes onto this sheet so that we have something to work from. So thank you, Catherine, for that.
You're welcome. And as Mike pointed out earlier, these attributes, if you could scroll up a little bit,
Yep.
these were all taken except for that bottom part. They're taken from the forms that are part of the Office of School Construction and Grant Review. And that's going to be critical to maintain an evaluation format that's consistent with the grant application. It makes sense for us to evaluate all the properties. It says that you need to evaluate existing buildings and like if you look at items 20 and 21, these were comments in the OSCGR's guidelines that state that you have to review it for extensions, additions to existing school facilities too. So it's not just for land for this evaluation. This is for any building, whether it be center or hall or be, you know, another town-owned building that's suitable for a school. So this is really just a, you know, an evaluation matrix. It's in draft form right now, but it's a way that we can check off all the boxes to make sure that we've at least researched this and documented for each of the parcels. As you'll see at the top of the spreadsheet, it's broken down by each of the parcels, and then there's a separate spreadsheet that has the details of the parcels, which we have nothing right now other than Holland School. So this is just Holland Center. I'm sorry. This is just a draft, as we said.
So Catherine, Phil has raised his hand and Ralph has raised his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So we'll go with Ralph first. You're on the top of the screen.
Okay, thank you. Mike, have you looked at section 4000 in the standards page?
This is
I'm
sorry.
3.
Yeah.
Section
I don't have it in front of me,
4000.
Catherine, you can answer
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, this is section 4000, actually, that it was taken from that.
Section, all right, 4000, page 3, site size. Number one, my point is simple. The 19 acres is a recommended minimum, not an absolute. And the question then comes, for an elementary school, are we elementary or middle? We're actually both. For an elementary school, the minimum acreage for 400 students would be 14 acres. For a middle school, it would be 19, a recommended minimum. There is a paragraph below that that simply states deviation from recommended minimum site sizes may be needed because of extenuating circumstances, especially in urban areas. So my point is 19 is not an absolute number.
Yeah, and this is a draft, Ralph. So, you know, and the 19 was not under it wasn't under the forms. If you look at the very bottom, it's under the minimum preferred requirements per OSCGR and Willington feedback.
Okay.
So so I mean, right now it's not a hard number. We're going to further define these acreage. So
we need to determine the footprint, square footage of the building that will be necessary to meet the educational standards. We also need to understand exactly what our curriculum will require as far as additional outside space. And I don't know that we have any numbers on that yet.
I'll just comment on that briefly, Catherine. Yes, Ralph, I think you're exactly right about that. And this, I think, is more important when we talk about scoring, because we will have certain things in scoring that will be absolute, probably. If it's a negative on a certain attribute, that might be an absolute contraindication to using that property. We do not have to make the 19 acres an absolute. It can
Right.
just be an assessment of that piece of property. And then if OCGR says on the appointed day, they say, we are only going to fund you at 19, or they might say, you presented a plan that we're willing to accept 17, or whatever the number is. Then we can look back at the sheet and say, well, this piece has 17 or 19 or 22 or whatever.
Okay, I just don't want to get hung up on the 19 minimum, that's all.
Yeah, nor do we. I mean, it's, if you want, I can get rid of the word minimum and preferred and just leave it as Willington feedback. You know, again, this is a draft, so, you know, we can discuss that in our subcommittee.
That's fine.
But
I don't want to hang up here. This is
Yeah,
not the
no,
point.
I agree. And I think, Mike, this is good. I'm glad you shared this. We could probably resume, you know, some of the detailed questions in our subcommittee when that is set up. And if you don't, oh, we gotta, Phil wanted to say something and then
Yes.
we'll move on. Phil and Justin. Let's go with Phil first.
And you answered one of my questions. Was I just wanted to make sure this came from OSCGR's guidelines, because that's really what matters. I've heard several times that if you're interested in a piece of property, that OSCGR will approve it or not. So it might make sense if you close in on a property. Mike, I think it would be well before you put a grant application in, you would want to know that they're going to be okay with that property or not. So if you close in on a property that you want to have them take a peek at it, it's worth contacting them. And then the last thing I was going to say about your list is when we went through, and this is again why we went into executive session with the Board of Education and this group early on, was just to review the properties. Are there properties out there? And it was one of the things we did, was just to go through some of the properties to see what was out there. And that list was shortened really fast because of the absolute no's. And you have a great list there. But I wouldn't, I'm hoping and I'm assuming you're not going to do this, but I feel like I have to say it. A site of 6 acres is not worth looking at. And that's my opinion. Maybe a site that's on a cliff or, you know, impossible to get to. I think you might be able to eliminate properties without a score just because of 1 or 2 different attributes. Instead of wasting your time on every single one.
I agree, Phil. I think that I intend to move forward.
Yeah, good point.
Justin has his hand up too.
Yeah, and to Ralph's point about the 19 acres, we're gonna have to hone in on what is that acreage? Is it a minimum of 15? Is it, let's figure out what that needs to be before we, you know, start crossing off properties. But to Phil's point, yes, 6 acres, obviously that's not gonna be one that we want to focus our time on. Justin?
I was just going to say, the way it's worded there, we're not really ruling it out being under 19 acres. And if we're setting up some type of scoring system, at least you can put a score to it
Right.
as part of the property, whether it's usable. I mean, we could be less than 19 acres and have a better piece of property that is easier developed or however, but
Yeah.
That's
That's
all
a
I
good
had.
point. I can't see everybody, so if anybody can see everybody, is there anyone else that has their hand up before I leave this topic?
All right, I'm
do.
just gonna add one.
Wait, I have my hand up, Ralph.
I'm sorry,
A
go
couple
ahead.
opportunities.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's blending in with the yellow wall, Erica.
No, that's okay. So 2 things. One, I piggyback on what Justin was saying. That was one of my 2 comments. And to Phil's point, if we're gonna, if we would look ahead with a new piece of property, I would look for some guidance soon. I think it's evident that, you know, we were interested in whether or not the current piece of property we have at Hall School is something. There's certainly, I wouldn't say based on the writing in their document that we fall into those extenuating circumstances. We are not in an urban area where land is at a minimum. So I would like some guidance sooner rather than later on that. So if we're going to go to them with a a newer piece of property, if we could look at our existing property at the same time, I think that would be beneficial.
Thank you, Erica. And then who else? There was somebody else
Yeah, it was me.
besides, okay, anybody else besides Ralph? And then after Ralph, we'll close this up and move on. Go ahead, Ralph.
Okay, well, it was just to piggyback, I think, on what Phil said about geography, topography. That can easily rule out properties without even attempting to score it. Because we know our town, we know the topography, we know where things are wet, and we know where rock outcrops are. So it may have 25 acres, but realistically, by the time you're done with site development and finding the area that you need for a building and fields, it's just not there. We don't need to get too detailed with some of those properties. That's all.
Right. I think it's helpful to have this guide, and we'll certainly discuss it in our next subcommittee meeting. So Mike, thanks for leading that. And
Brianna has her
Brianna
hand
has
up.
her hand up. Yeah,
who's that?
Brianna.
Brianna.
Hi,
Go ahead,
just
Brianna.
wondering, is there a place somewhere else to put those properties that are disqualified because of something, as Ralph, like Ralph was just listing there? If they're not going to be on this list and they're not going to be evaluated, but they're still owned by the town, for example, will those be documented somewhere for our townspeople?
I think, Brianna, I think we could have those listed here. And we'd set the spreadsheet, to sort
Yeah.
all the ones that were eliminated and put them on one end.
Yeah.
And that way, if someone wanted to say, well, did you evaluate this piece of property?
Right.
We can prove our due diligence. We can
Yeah,
say,
that's what I'm
looked at
thinking.
it briefly, and we eliminated it for this big reason. It was a no-go for this reason.
Right, that's what I was wondering, just if it would be documented somewhere so that that would be very clear. Okay,
Yeah, we can add a tab, separate tab for like all the properties that we evaluate, Mike, on this.
Right.
All right, if there's no one else with their hand up, let's see if I can see everybody. I apologize, I'm trying to look at the
Like
screen.
type
and-
sharing. Yeah, stop sharing
Yeah.
and then you can see everybody.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
Hey, Catherine, I'm not sure if you want to entertain it or if he's interested, but I see Chris Cycles in this meeting.
Yeah.
He may be able to give us a quick snapshot of how many school districts that apply for grants actually get a grant if it doesn't meet the minimum in our area. Rural, not necessarily urban.
Chris, I don't know if you're prepared to answer that question, but if you'd like to wait to present to speak, we can certainly hear what you have to say, give you a little time to prepare your response.
Good evening. Hi. No, that's okay. I can address that. Are you referring to getting a grant based on purchasing or acquiring land? The land acquisition piece of this is, I don't know if you've had any conversations with the Office of School Construction Grants or not regarding purchasing or acquiring land. They've gotten away from that over the last couple of years. Now, that current director or the former director is no longer there. So they are going to revert back to the intent of the statutory language. However, yeah, I'm fairly certain you'd have to make a pretty convincing argument. Now, what they could do or probably would do is give you the grant. However, the land acquisition piece would be ineligible. That would more than likely be the option if they so inclined to not reimburse you for the purchase. Now there are guidelines with regard to reimbursement of site acquisition funds. It has to be you have to get 2 appraisals. It's the lesser of the 2 appraisals, or the purchase price, whichever is less. and that's the amount that is eligible for reimbursement at your reimbursement rate. So there are guidelines for that. However, like I said, in the past handful of years, they've gotten away from reimbursing for land purchases. So I don't see your grant being in jeopardy, just the amount of eligibility.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And, I just want to clarify it, there's a lot of discussion about land and properties, and how we got here was because we have a subcommittee for land assessment, and we're just about to start evaluating existing town properties and any potential properties. It's an evaluation process. We are not ready to move in any one direction or another. I just wanted to clarify that. But Chris, thank you for your input, and we will get started with on our subcommittee meetings for the land assessment. So thank you again for your comments.
Perfect, you're welcome.
If we can move on to old business, the first item we had was just an update on the request for proposals. So in our last meeting, we had come up with a few ideas about how to develop our request for proposal for owners, a project manager. There was discussion about whether we hire a professional to prepare that RFP for us, or if we're going to tackle it as a committee. So a few of us on this committee have gotten together and have put together a draft RFP. We have one more meeting to review the final details of it. It's still a draft form, and we are going to take up Chris's offer to take a preliminary look at it, as well as Collier's offer. So once we get some feedback from both of those companies, we will bring it back to the committee with a, hopefully a final RFP, and then we can put it out on the street to hopefully find a owner project manager for us. I think a lot of these questions regarding land and some of the next steps in the process it'll be beneficial to work with the OPM to get us heading in the right direction. So, and one last thing about the RFP, we're not quite prepared to share it with the committee yet. We've got a good scope of work that will take us through referendum and hopefully prepare an RFP for an architect engineer to help us with the next steps, a proposal for that. But at this point, we're not quite ready to share that. We're still working on some of the details. The next item, request to create a finance subcommittee. This item has been tabled a couple times, but it is on the agenda again, and I'll give the opportunity to Peter Latentix. He had suggested creating a finance subcommittee, and I believe our last request was to share with us some of the tasks that this subcommittee would do, and what the purpose of it is going to be. So Peter, if you're ready, you'd like to share with us.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Well, yes, and I'm perfectly content to wait until the owner rep is on board, which I know we're moving towards, but I think it's important to evaluate whichever solutions we're looking at, whether it's new, remodeling, or a hybrid or both, and evaluate the financial impact of those potential solutions on the taxpayers, on the capital process in town, just what the numbers would be that as we develop proposals for whatever our final school solution is. That just makes sense to me. But I think once the owner's rep is on board and we start delving into those areas, that will be more apparent to us, and a finance subcommittee could be looking at evaluating what the impact of a given solution would be. I mean, does that make sense to everyone? Especially since we're intimately familiar with our town's financial construction as far as our tax base, our capital improvement process, our school budgets, and we're entering the budget season, as Mike Full knows, as our chair of the finance board. So it would parallel nicely with the owner rep coming on board.
So Peter, thank you for that. Can you just, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand it a little bit clearer. Can you just give me an example of like something that you would, the subcommittee would do?
Well,
Like
if we were,
I understand you were saying you want to
Well,
evaluate the numbers for each of the options, which I see that the owner's representative will be helping us with those numbers and estimates. So are you saying that, let's say option A is 20 million, option B is 50 million. Are you saying once we have those numbers, how that impacts each one of the town residents? Is that what you're saying?
well, that would be one possible, one possible area. I think even before that, it would make sense just to understand what the financial implications are for the town, for our community, going from 2 schools, which we presently have, to a single school. What
Okay.
does that mean?
Yeah.
And what is the scope of that dollars wise that we would have to finance to complete such a project? I mean, I would think that would make it more attractive for the community. I think the Board of Ed was looking at that prior to our committee's existence and seeing that that had a lot of advantages. So what are those advantages dollars wise? What, for example, happens to our per pupil cost if we go from 2 remote facilities to a single K-8 facility?
Okay.
I think it's important for us to understand and then present to the community. And I think it'd be easier to work on that, just as the land evaluation committee is working on criteria for properties. It'd be useful for a finance subcommittee to be looking at that. I say this because when I was on the Board of Ed, I served on a finance subcommittee and always found it to be very effective.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Peter, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one thing we discussed in the past where this subcommittee might come in to play would be the potential financial impact of us leaving either or both of these buildings behind also. Like if we were, if for example, we were going to no longer occupy Hall School, and from meeting with the Castles and the Hall family, we knew that there was an expectation of doing something with the building before they took it back or whatever. I'm making things up. But if it was going to cost the town, say, $50,000 to get out of one of those buildings, or 100,000 or $1 million, whatever it is, that's something that you would also be considering in this subcommittee, so that when we bring everything to the taxpayer, we say, this is kind of the plan, this is how we evaluated, and these are the downstream costs of this plan. Is that
completely agree, Mike.
Okay.
I think whatever we present to the community has to be a total cost. So if for example, we're vacating both buildings, what is the financial impact of leaving those buildings, potentially demolishing those buildings? What is the potential revenue if those become real estate items that are sold by the town, as Erica was alluding to earlier with the other properties she mentioned. A lot of variables, but I completely agree with you. That needs to be in the total cost whatever solution we move towards.
Thank you.
Peter, just a quick question. How would you evaluate those costs? Like, would you need access to something? I mean, how do you get those costs without like having that data sort of at your fingertips?
That's an excellent question, Catherine. I don't know if any of them have a great deal of experience in disposing of properties, but I'm hoping that our owner's rep does.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we're not the first community ever to face this situation.
Right.
And that the subcommittee can reach out to other communities that may have done this. Our owner's rep may have resources in that area. I'm wondering if I can never get that acronym straight, the
OSCGR.
Thank you, Catherine. This can't be the first time this issue has come up. So I'm hoping we can, you're right. I mean, it's important to understand it and attach some cost to it, but how we arrive at it will have to be some sort of collective effort, I would think.
Okay.
But I think it's important. And I'm also wondering, I think our guest tonight alluded to the change from the school construction department to now DAS, is if I read it correctly in the newspaper. And what does that mean? What is their criteria for these situations? I don't know. Maybe he can comment again tonight. I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, I don't know that any one person's going to know that answer, and is definitely a curiosity question, but it's not really a topic for this discussion tonight. I mean, I'm curious too, but I honestly don't think we're going to get the answer until we actually start going through the process.
You're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, all right. So, I mean, it looks like, one of the things, I don't know if anybody has any other comments, but
Ralph's got his hand up.
hang on one second, Ralph. One of the comments that I was hoping this committee would do too, and tell me what you think, is if there's maybe some kind of spreadsheet or matrix that keeps track of the spends that we are going to be, we've gotten a chunk of money to hire consultants, and we're going to start writing POs to help us manage this process moving forward. So that's kind of something that I was envisioning being tracked of. I don't know, Peter, if that's something you had also thought of as part of this subcommittee's task.
I did not, but it's a great suggestion, Catherine. Tracking the funds we have available and how we're going to use them.
Correct.
I don't think the subcommittee should overshadow the committee of a whole, but I suspect the committee as a whole will have a lot to say about how we
I just mean as a tracking mechanism.
Yeah, that may well make sense.
Yeah.
I think it's a great suggestion. The other thing I want to quickly mention, Catherine, was what I also would like to see a finance subcommittee do is consider other sources of revenue besides state reimbursement for this project, and see how that could potentially play a role.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Ralph?
Okay, just to add to one of the things I think Peter mentioned, the taxpayers that I know well are one of the first questions they're going to have when we consolidate into one school is, what's the savings by consolidating? And I think that's something that this finance committee should be able to address, because that question will come up, and we need to be able to answer it in an intelligent fashion that the poor taxpayer is going to understand and hopefully be willing to accept.
Yep. All right, is there any other discussion about forming a finance subcommittee? And if not, is there a motion on the table to create a finance subcommittee as a subcommittee to this school building committee?
So moved.
So your first motion, Mike?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, second?
A second for discussion.
Discussion?
Well, I'm pleased to see that this is being well received and would be happy to serve on this committee. Subcommittee.
Anne?
I agree with Peter that I think it's a great idea, but I agree with Peter that we might want to wait until we have our owner's project manager on board so that we have a big picture and we see how the finance committee fits into that big picture.
Thank you. Anyone else? Peter, are you, just a quick question, are you wanting to wait to take a vote until we get our
Yeah,
OPM on
that's,
board? Or
if the committee as a whole has a higher comfort level with that, perfectly willing to wait.
Erica?
I think it's okay for us to agree to form the subcommittee.
Mhm.
To that point, we may choose to wait to have formal
take-
meetings until after an OPM has been done, but we can go ahead and agree on that and set membership for it.
Good point. Any other discussion? Mike?
I was just gonna say that exact same thing that Erica said. We
Okay.
can get the committee approved and we can move forward with action when it's time for the action.
Okay. Any other discussion? Before we vote, do we have any volunteers that would like to join? I assume, Peter, you're going to be leading this subcommittee.
Happy to do so.
Okay. Any volunteers? Erica? Anyone else?
How many people are we trying
What's-
to, two things. Should we vote first? And how many people are we trying to get on the board or the subcommittee?
Well, we're still in discussion, so I think it'd be important to identify the committee and then vote.
I would say 3 or 4, Justin. That would be my opinion. No more than 4.
How many are on the land subcommittee?
Okay, who's not on the subcommittee? So
think-
Justin, was that a volunteer or?
I-
No,
were
he
you-
asked how
can-
many were on the land subcommittee. I think it's 4, right?
Yeah, there's 4 on the
Yeah,
land.
it's 4.
I can volunteer myself.
Okay, thank you. So Erica, Justin, and Peter. All right, is there anyone else? Okay, let's take a vote. We'll do overall, well, I guess I gotta call everybody, right? This would be a,
No, you can
Okay.
see if
You
it's
can try
unanimous
and all.
first.
all right, let's see if it's unanimous. So all in favor of creating a finance subcommittee to the overall school building committee? All in favor, say aye.
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 I,
Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. All right, so we expect a full report in our next project meeting, Peter.
You got it, Catherine.
Just kidding.
Just a random thought here. You voted on forming the subcommittee. Do you need to agree on members now? And Erica, I'm really directing that question to you.
I think it can't hurt.
Yeah, I think you should now appoint the members because you did not. You were making a motion to form a committee and now you should make a motion to appoint the members of that
members.
committee.
Okay, so I'll make, sorry, go ahead, Ann.
I have a question. Is everyone present tonight? Is there anyone that might be interested that's not here tonight?
So Gary Anderson is not present and he's already on the land assessment committee, and I believe he's helping with the RFP.
Okay.
Erica is not here as well. I mean, there's a chance that she would be, but
What?
No.
Erica is here.
No, the Erica
Erica
Boucher.
Boucher.
Oh, I'm
Other-
sorry. Okay, Erica Bouchard. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yes,
Any
But thanks for
other,
noticing me, Mike.
yes. In anyone's life, for two Ericas?
Thanks for noticing.
any other comments? Okay, so I would like to make a motion to appoint the 3 members, Erica, Justin, and Peter Latinsix, to be members of the finance subcommittee to the overall school building committee. So I made a motion. Is there second? Mike?
Can I just add a friendly amendment to your motion that it be Erica
Sure.
Waschinsky, just for clarification purposes?
Yeah, we'll put, yeah, we should put actually, if the meeting recorder can just include the last names of each of the members.
One of the hazards of not showing up for a meeting is that you can get appointed to things
You
without
sure
your knowledge.
can. Gary and Erica are on every committee.
So we've got Erica Wojcinski, Justin Naderno, and Peter Latinsix. So we've got a first and second, and we're gonna vote. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes for the appointees of Erica, Justin, and Peter to the finance subcommittee. Thank you all. Now I gotta find my, okay, next item. Not sure if anyone is present for the discussion of hall school questions, but it is on the agenda. If there are any questions about the hall school questions that we've had or anything related to it, if the committee members want to share their thoughts, I'll open the table for that. If not, I'll move on to the next item. Phil?
It seems like we have a sense that this might not be the forum, and I think I've said this before, but this might not be the forum. Because we've sent out lots of invitations and it doesn't, we've not had anybody here. And it may make sense at this point, maybe Catherine, to try and, I don't think this is even a subcommittee thing. I think, maybe this is something where if you could set up a meeting with maybe one other member, or when we get the OPM on board. I don't think the conversation is not critical in the next month for us. But we want to know, and we want it to be public. So if there's a way, we can't obviously do it through this process, we can, but it doesn't appear to be happening. So maybe it makes sense, and I don't know what the committee thinks, but maybe it makes sense for you. You've had some contact with Alice, and maybe it makes sense for you and the OPM, who is a neutral, would be a neutral, to have a sit down with Alice, or a representative from the Hall Foundation who can answer for the Hall Foundation. And then, maybe get some answers in writing, that maybe they would agree that, hey, yes, that's exactly what I said, and share with the committee. So that way someone's not on the spot necessarily in our committee, because it doesn't seem like maybe this is the forum to do it. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Phil. Point well taken. I think that's a good idea.
Ralph and Erica have their hands up.
Oh, okay, sorry. Ralph?
Okay, Catherine, you and I have had a conversation about this. And thinking about the situation, we actually have something similar to a reverse land purchase. If we were to have a conversation with a landowner looking at a particular parcel for school, we would not have that discussion in a public forum. The Hall Foundation is a private foundation. There are no public funds involved there. I think that having the discussion, an intimate discussion with them without subjecting them to public scrutiny for at least the initial discussion about Hall School is more appropriate than trying to get them into a public meeting. And I think that's why they're not here. They're not showing up. They don't want to discuss this in a public forum. And I think it's more appropriate that it be an executive session discussion and not a public discussion. I've said my piece so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph. Is there any
You have
comment,
Erica,
Justin?
Erica
Oh,
and
sorry.
Erica,
Brianna.
Brianna, and Peter both all have their hands up.
Okay, let's go with Erica.
All right, so I wanted to counter, or not counter, but piggyback on what Phil said. I think maybe Catherine, if you had a discussion and instead of taking a member of this committee, I think it would be important to take a neutral party at that point. And so an OPM seems to be the ideal. I disagree with Ralph. I do not believe this would be something that would be right for executive session. And if we were entertaining that, I would want to get a legal opinion on whether or not that was okay for executive session. I just don't know this falls under the parameters.
Well, I would agree with getting a legal opinion for sure.
I understand why they may not want to come out in public, but at some point we are going to have the discussion. And I think it's important for all of us that they be part of that discussion, but we won't be able to put off what the town is going to do with the building if we were to move in a direction other than using it. And so, but I would want a legal opinion before we entertain an executive session.
Well, I think the deed is pretty clear, Ms. Wyszynski, that if we stop using it as a school, it goes back to the Hall Foundation.
That is correct. So we're not negotiating that now. We're not at a point where we're saying we're not using it. So I don't know that
Exactly.
using that for a means to have an executive session is the right way to go here. So,
Right. And it may not be the right timing.
right.
Either.
We're nowhere near saying we want to change the deed. So negotiating that, I just don't think that we're at that point. So,
Exactly.
I question.
And again, just to clarify the process in which we are at right now, we're not in any position to make a decision one way or the other regarding land or regarding Hall School or Center School. We really reached out to the Hall Foundation just to get them engaged in our building committee meetings, have them listen and hear what we're going through and some of the progress we're making. So it was really more of a courtesy to get them involved in our process and have them be part of the discussion. I agree with Erica. I agree with what Ralph was saying too, that maybe at some point there will be a reason to go into executive session, but I don't think we're there yet. I think at this point we really just want to, engage the Hall Foundation in our process. I'll go to a few more people. I think Peter, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did want to comment and say that I think it would be useful to have a neutral party have some sort of preliminary contact with the Hall Foundation. But at the same time, I agree with Ralph that in many ways, our interaction with them is very similar to a potential land seller to us, because essentially everything we want to discuss with the Hall Foundation involves the flexibility of the ownership of that property and the way the deed is written. And that discussion to me, certainly, just as it would be with a seller of land to the town, should be in executive session of some kind, and not public. But I also agree that there should be some preliminary contact with the Hall Foundation so that could be facilitated.
Anyone else? It looks like Justin has his hand up and Brianna. Let's go with Justin.
You can go to Brianna first. She had hers up before I did.
So what a gentleman. Brianna.
Sure, but I'm just rewriting my notes so it sounds, some kind of proper. Okay, dealer's choice, I guess, wild card. Yeah, so every time this comes up, I'm really, really hoping that someone will be here to answer our questions and have this conversation with us, because I think it's so, so important. I know we all agree on that. And the reason why it's so, so important is twofold. Of course, we want them to know that we care about them as people, community members, a foundation here in our town, and the building that we all love and appreciate. And that's important that they know that coming from us. We could be a bunch of people who just plan on walking away from their building or their family, their foundation. And that is not the case at all. So we're trying to build a relationship with them as a school building committee. And that's important. So I think that their comfort level in communicating with us is important. It's something that we need to sort of yield to if we can. So we've invited them to meetings. I thought we already had asked them if they would like to meet with a smaller group. Is that not true? Am I remembering that wrong? Did we ever ask them if they wanted to meet with just a few of us? Remember? I don't know.
So I thought so, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
think the
thought we
executive
did,
session
but
thing came up before too, and it was kind of the same thing, is that it's sort of public, sort of not. That got a little bit tacky, a little sticky. So we've given them our questions in writing. Would it be possible for them maybe to feel comfortable giving us responses in writing to in some way? And then if we
Yeah.
needed to follow up with that, we could do it maybe that way.
I have requested that. In fact, I sent the day that Peter sent those questions in, and we the day that we all agreed that those questions were good. They went right to Alice, and I was hoping to get some kind of response in an email, but I haven't seen anything yet.
Okay. And we need this, I want this to be, of course, as positive as possible. And I know we all agree on that, but I always find myself asking what happens if we don't hear back from them? Like, where does that leave things? And it doesn't feel so great in that spot. So I hope that they understand the purposes of building a relationship with them. We want it to be as positive as possible. We're not, looking for certain answers. We just want them to be involved, like you said. So really, however we can communicate with them is what we need to do, I think.
And Brianna, it's nice to hear you say that, because, you know, there's in the conversation I've had with Alice, I've let her know on behalf of the subcommittee, the school building committee, that, you know, we are not interested in tearing down or doing anything like that. We're evaluating all of our options. And so I think I've clearly communicated that to her. We really just want to engage them in the conversation with the building committee.
Yeah, it
that's
sounds
really.
like you've tried several times, a couple different ways. I just didn't know if having them write back to us was something we had pursued. Maybe that will.
Yeah, I did ask her. I mean, I could send her questions again, and just say, you know, encourage her to share this with some of the other members, and maybe they could respond. But I do like the suggestion that Phil made earlier, which is perhaps myself and the OPM, once they're on board, we could set up a sit down. I think that might be the most appropriate way to do it, and just have a conversation and maybe ask her those questions if we don't get feedback from them on the questions, you know.
If she likes tea, we can invite her for tea. If she's the coffee kind of lady, we could invite her for coffee. Whatever it is that she's going to need, or anyone from the foundation is going to need to be able to have a conversation, that's what we're gonna do. I'll bake brownies if that's what, that's what.
Thank you. Justin?
I never really thought of these questions the way we are until Ralph brought up the points with the property and the deed. They could not be responding also, because this is, once you put it in writing, they're held, we could hold them to that. And obviously when we came up with this, that was not our intention, but
right.
I'm sure part of this is they don't want to create a document that could be used against them. Back to the point of, I think our best way to go is to try to have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to put something in writing, or at least at this point, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Justin. And that's all it would be. It would be a conversation and no decisions would get made because that's something that this committee has to be involved in, you know, so.
Correct, but if they gave us the answers to all those questions and then say we decide to do something else besides use this school, and whenever they put in those questions, they decide something different,
Right.
we could use that document. I mean, not saying it holds any water, but I'm sure that's part of it.
Thank you. Anne?
It might also be possible that they may want to talk to us later in the process
Right,
when we have more direction about what we are thinking of doing. So right now, we really don't have a lot of, you know, tangible plans. So I think maybe they may want to talk a little later on too.
that's a good point, Anne. Thank you. Ralph?
Just a question for you, Catherine. Have you asked Mrs. Cassels if she has a preference, who to sit down and talk with, members of this committee?
No.
She may
I-
have more comfort level with certain people
Yeah.
on the committee. And if she has a preference who she'd like to sit down and talk with, why don't you try and feel her out on that? That might actually get us somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, because of our conversations on the phone, I think she would be comfortable with me and her talking, but I'm not comfortable going by myself. I would like somebody else there, whether it be a committee member. We talked about a neutral party, OPM. I think that's a great idea, but I don't want to go solo.
I
Not-
understand.
I
understand.
I think it would be important, and I think the OPM actually is probably a good, you know, is a good way to go in. Yeah, so.
Well, not to try and coin a phrase here, but the people that on the Hall Foundation are old school, if you will, Willington residents. I think that they're going to have more comfort level with someone like Mike. Mike's been in town for almost all of his life. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I've been here all of my life. Alice knows me. She knows my family. I think she would have comfort level sitting down in a real face-to-face conversation about it, off the record, but just kicking around the questions and the answers.
Yeah, I think we broached the subject of having a few committee members meet, but then I thought we got a ruling that we couldn't do that legally. I thought that all of the work of the subcommittee had to be done in this subcommittee. Erica, can you speak to that?
We don't have a quorum.
We don't have a quorum, so I question doing some business. But then Ralph, to your point, if you're gonna have an off the record conversation and not come back and share it with this entire committee, where does that get us anywhere than we are right now? So that would be my concern, is that those she didn't have an intimate comfort level with, because they haven't lived in town for forever and she doesn't know their whole family based on, those thoughts. Where does that leave the rest of the committee? We're nowhere where we are. So I'd rather get us to a point where we can have an open conversation, because then I don't see you coming back and having an on the record conversation with us about your off the record conversation. So how do you see that play out? I think it gets a few members a little bit more insight. And then what about the rest of the committee, and how do we handle that? Because if you're going to go to her with an off the record conversation, then I wouldn't expect that you would go committee member by committee member and share it. I don't know, it gets a little tricky for me.
Thank you, Erica. Mike?
So I would agree that there may, since this is not, they don't seem to be eager to attend a meeting. So
Publicly.
right, publicly, at least at this point. So I think finding a way for a soft start maybe to our advantage, as we've been talking about. Ralph's comment about people having been in town for a while might be an advantage just to start the conversation. And I would say that in the answer to the question of how do we go have an off the record conversation and turn it into an on the record report is that we don't. We go and have an off the record conversation. The only purpose of that conversation is to say, here are the things the committee is concerned about. How would you like to communicate the answers? How do we give you a comfort level? Would you like to, basically, we just use it as an introduction and an icebreaker. And we don't actually try to get those answers unofficially or officially in that meeting. We use that meeting to break the ice and find a way to get some momentum and say, if you would rather not attend a public meeting, would you like to get together with your foundation members and write answers to questions maybe, or whatever, see if we can just get some momentum. And then that will allow us to have a later appropriate either public or executive committee within the rules.
Mhm. Thank you,
Good
Mike.
point, Mike.
And can I just make one other point? Just for everyone on the committee, I think just out of fairness to their family or respect to their family, we should get the pronunciation correct. Plus his last name is Castles, not Cassels or anything else. It's Castles. And I'm not trying to pick on anyone. I just think we should make sure that we're saying her name correctly.
Did I get it wrong, Mike?
It's Castles.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, well, I've heard a couple times. I wasn't sure.
I know.
A couple times I've heard it Cassels. And I'm not
Thank you,
trying.
Mike. Brianna?
Brianna, I think you're on.
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure that folks from the Hall Foundation feel welcome to reach out to us to ask what we are doing, what we're about, what our charge is, and maybe a conversation could be more informative for them rather than us asking them questions they could ask us. I know that if I was put on the spot and said, we have these questions for you, that would feel, I'd feel like I was under a whole lot of pressure. So we take the pressure off and just meet so that we could answer some of their questions about our charge, what we're doing, and kind of things that we're looking at. I hope they feel that that's definitely possible. That might help take some of the pressure off too. It's a two-way relationship, right?
Right. Thank you, Brianna. Anne?
The other question is the foundation an actual group of people? If it is, perhaps we might want to meet with them and have a conversation if they're the governing body of the family organization.
That's a good point, Anne.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that it is a group of people, but a group of Hall family members.
Yeah, the impression I got last time I talked to her was that they haven't met in a while.
Okay.
Any other comments before we move on?
Yeah, I don't want, some of my comments that may seem harsh one or the other. I am absolutely in favor of us having an open discussion with them. I just want us to be cognizant of the fact that we're trying to be very transparent about this process. And this is just one more piece of it. And I want to make sure we do it right. And I really, really think it's important that no matter what we do, even if we were to, our end project that we bring to the town is renovating this building to new. That's basic, could be taking this building down to the studs and really changing a lot of it. I still would want them to be part of the conversation for all of that. So it's, getting them to the table. As I look at our questions, some of them don't put them on the spot of making any decisions about, the land. They could start with just a couple of them. Are you understanding of our charge, and making sure that they know where we're at and know how to find out the information. So I really hope that we can get to a point where we can have an open conversation, whether it be Alice or another member of her family participating in conversation with us. And to Brianna's point, if it's just asking us questions, I just want to get them to be able to talk to the whole committee, which allows everyone else in town who's following this process to know where we stand, where they stand, where the discussion is going.
Exactly. Thank you, Erica. Peter?
I just want to not end this conversation without enthusiastically agreeing with Brianna and Mike. this is a wonderful organization, the Hall Foundation, that has been from my read of Willington histories, I'm not a lifer, has been a major benefactor to our town for many years. So I can only view them in a positive context. So I really like the idea of what Mike's suggesting, an informal meeting that could subsequently lead to the correct setting where we could discuss with them the flexibilities of their deed to the school property, because no matter what solution we pursue, they are going to be an integral part of this. Even if we totally abandon that site, we'll have to do something with it. So it's important that we get to that point. And I think they'll fully understand that, but I like the idea of the informal contact and then leading to something more formal to move the process forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I'm more than willing to set up a meeting with Alice. And if one of the other committee members like Mike, if this committee is comfortable with the two of us sitting down with Alice and maybe another member of the Hall Foundation, we can certainly set that up. But again, I do like Phil's idea, having a neutral party, but maybe this initial contact, actually, maybe it would be better for us to make it more of a personal reach out so that they're comfortable, to Brianna's point, and that we're really not trying to pressure them into any kind of decision making. This is really just a reach out, let them know what we've been doing, and to see if they have questions for us. I mean, if the rest of the committee is comfortable with that, and Mike, if you're willing to, I mean, I can set something up with her,
Yeah, I mean, I went to school with her kids, and I actually helped probably 4 years ago, I helped her recover one of the copper signs that was down in the village at the south entrance to the village near Batty Road. There was a copper sign that said, "Welcome to South Willington Village." And it talked about the Hall Foundation. That sign belonged to them, but it got removed from the posts in a property dispute. And I negotiated with the property owners, helped to get the sign back. So maybe I have some ability to connect with them. So I'm willing to go with you on that.
Is everybody comfortable with that approach? Because we can, I can reach out as soon as tomorrow if.
I think that's a great idea, and I understand taking an OPM or a neutral party, but that also could be intimidating. Mike, you could probably be intimidating when you try to be.
When we need them to be.
Friendly
right?
face is pretty good here in this instance, and Catherine's, she's awfully nice too, so.
Oh, thanks.
And we could, the OPM could
Brianna.
go at the OPM could go at a later date when we have, this is a
Right.
relationship building meeting and incorporating them into the process. So I think it's a great plan.
Just from the legal.
Catherine, I'd be happy to join you and Mike in sitting down with Ms. Castles and having a conversation.
Thank you, Ralph. Erica, is that just running it by the legal aspect of it? Are we breaking any rules by doing that?
Listen, it's not a quorum, so if somebody, this whole meeting is public. If somebody questions it as a result, I'm not gonna I can't give you a legal opinion here. But if somebody in the public questions that, then we go from there. But I would say you're not in a quorum of this group, so.
We're not making any decisions either. We're
Right.
just having a conversation.
I can't tell you what you're gonna do in there, so I'd be hesitant
Right.
to say what you are or aren't doing. I can say that you aren't meeting in a quorum. And so it doesn't meet the definition of a meeting. But again, if something came from that, then we'd have to look at it down the road, but.
Okay, thank you. So let me reach out to her via phone first and I'll see if there's a date and see if she's comfortable with 3 of us, or if she just wants 1 of us, or just 2 of us. I'll play it by ear, but I'll try reaching out to her. For now, I would like to just keep this meeting agenda, discuss the hall school questions. I'd like to just keep it on our future meetings in case, they do come. It'd be nice to have that conversation if they have a change of heart and want to discuss publicly. So we'll continue to carry this item on our future agendas. Next item is just a quick update on search for a recording secretary. As most of you know, we're still in search of a recording secretary. And Kelsey has volunteered to take on this task, and she's doing a great job. So thank you. Erica, do we have any update on the posting of a recording secretary?
It's out there. We've had 0 bites. Several other committees are in the same boat. And I will say, we are all super appreciative of Kelsey. I'm going to make us all aware that as we go into budget season, she'll have her hands full with Board of Selectmen and other things that come out of this office. So I can't speak for her personal time. That's up to her. But if anyone, again, if you know someone out there who has a skill set and a few hours a month to offer, it's a little extra cash.
Okay, so next item, do we have any new business? Thank you, Erica. Any new business from committee members? Not seeing any hands, so unless I'm missing it. Okay. Next item, present to speak. Chris, I think Chris, Michelle, Melissa, and Arthur. If any of you would like to speak, just introduce yourself and share your thoughts.
Oops. Hi, sorry, this is Chris. I got to get
Hi,
away from the
Chris.
light here.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. My pleasure. I appreciate the time to speak earlier. I look forward to getting a copy of the RFP to review, and I'll send you back our comments. And yeah, we look forward to potentially working together.
Great, thank you. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
offering to review it. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
Anyone else present to speak? Okay, we'll go to the next one, adjournment. Is there a motion on the table to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Mike?
Second.
Ralph? All in favor? Let's vote.
Aye.
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 Hi.
Any
Bye,
nays?
everybody.
Any
Good night.
nays? Any
Nobody wants to hang
abstentions?
out.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. It is 8:00 p.m. exactly.
Have a good
Have a
night.
nice Thanksgiving.